Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Communion podcast, where we traverse through the inner dwellings of the human experience through conversation. I'm your host, Danae. Join me as we explore the interconnection of creativity and community. Jake Hostetler bridges the worlds of creativity and business. He's a writer and a biotech intrapreneur who has lived and worked in the US, Germany, South Korea, and India. Jake's creative work includes an illustrative children's fable which received a Mom's Gold Choice Award in 2019, and a young adult fantasy series which won the Reader's Favorite Gold Award for Best Mythology and Fairytale in 2001, while also being shortlisted for an Ozma Award. In business, Jake works as a part of the global business development team at a biotechnology company by the name of Emerald Cloud Lab. Originally from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, he is an avid traveler, soccer player, and musician. I met Jake from our mutual friend and creative Johnny Liu and was instantly drawn to his willingness to connect. I'm so honored to welcome him in this space of communicative collaboration for today's episode. Without further ado, welcome Jake. Hello.
Hi, Danae. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super honored to have you here. The first and only time we've really been able to chat and be in presence with one another, I was instantly drawn to you. You're just...
Well, that's really flattering. I felt the same way, and it was great to meet you through Johnny, who I know in his own right is an amazing guy and just creative powerhouse. So that's really exciting to meet up this way and to have it on this kind of platform, right? To be able to speak so freely about creativity and what it means for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so curious where your creative journey started, if you will. I know that all of us have that intuitive nature as children. So I'm guessing you had some creative inclination as a child, but I love to see the origin story of where this began for many folks. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it may be quite relevant or similar for your case, because I know Brian, for example, your husband, I have, as a kid, I was very drawn to being outdoors and lifting up rocks, looking at insects, just exploring the natural world. And that for me was just, I think, a gateway opening into the curiosity that you have as a kid. So for me, being able to explore and having had that and hone that throughout my becoming an adult in my adult life was something that was, I guess, the touch point or the genesis of just constantly being curious about the world. And I think having a family and having a support system that allows you to do that is also hugely important in cultivating that in young people. And giving them the space to go out and explore. I can get into it later, but I guess the creative part of writing and storytelling came a bit later in life. Although I will say I think all of that starts for sure in childhood and it grows with you as you get older. And then it's really about how willing you are to express it or I guess run with it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Where did it lead you to in your adult life, maybe? Or how did your creative path with writing as an actual author, where did that begin? Because that's a huge accomplishment, which you've achieved in what seems like a very short amount of time. So for you to have utilized your life experience and all that you've learned throughout the years to then cultivate this process for you and create stories for the youth is really powerful. So I'd be super curious to hear kind of how that started for you and where that began.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. That's really sweet of you to say. And I think, yeah, it's a hard thing to answer exactly. So I've always enjoyed sharing stories and talking about them. I guess it was probably when I was leaving university. So just a 4-year college and undergraduate degree. And I was studying international business in German. And I had wanted to go out and see the world. And I thought I mean, that has been an avenue for me to do that. That's been a pathway for me to go out and have those global experiences. And I think while I was growing during that time, I wanted to also, I guess I had, it's almost like you realize you have a knack for something, or a certain propensity, or just, I wouldn't say, anyway, I really enjoyed writing, and I really enjoyed storytelling through that medium. So I started writing short stories around that time, nothing to publish at that point. And then in 2015, I moved to Germany, and about a year into living in Germany, I'd entered a short story contest. And the prompt of the contest was get a character into a situation and get them out of the situation again. And the story I wrote, for whatever reason, I'd been taking a lot of walks in nature at the time. And I was living in Aachen, Germany, and it's actually a beautiful, most western city in Germany, right on the border of Belgium and the Netherlands. And I've been taking a lot of long walks through the forests there. And the story I wrote was about a caterpillar who gets caught in a spider's web and needs to get out of the spider's web. And that would become this children's fable that was The Sky Belongs to the Dreamers. And it was actually my dad who said to me, you should try to publish this. You should make it into a book. And I found an illustrator, a colleague of mine who was very gifted at illustrating. And I asked her, would she be interested in illustrating? And it kind of grew from that. And then really, once that first one goes, I think if it's a snowball effect. You just want to create more of that, and you want to have a response, because I think stories are our way of reaching out to one another and connecting and making ourselves feel not validated, but just making ourselves feel like we existed here for a brief period. And then maybe somebody else along the way will come and feel that same way from reading your stories. So I think that was really the impetus that got me going on into the young adult, and now writing more novels. And, it's a hard thing to describe. It's grueling to write a book. It's a very long, arduous process. And it is, I'm not going to lie, for anybody interested or anybody who's already done it knows this. It is a trudge a lot of times. It's a trudge, and it's hard. And you have to really dig deep inside yourself to realize what this final form will become. But I think that you kind of, in a weird way, fall in love with that part of it, and the fact that you're kind of in complete control of that too, but you're also not. You're kind of working alongside something that's not yet manifested, but you're trying to work together to manifest it with the creativity, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like keeping yourself open to the story as it moves through you. You are the conduit. Mm-hmm. You just get to
exactly.
You get to be the guide and see wherever the creative force that moves through all of us, but in different ways because of our experiences, how it's going to move through you. And what an incredible journey that's been for you, I would imagine, especially telling fairy tales and getting an award for that specifically. I love folklore. I love fairy tales, and it really can remind us of the childlike wonder that's so ever present for us all. So what do you do to tap into that for yourself now as an adult to invigorate and enliven that in your stories? Because it has to be a give and take, right? I'm sure you have to do some things to invigorate that within yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. And, I think it's a personal one. I think naturally everybody's going to find they're going to access that part of themselves differently. However, there are certainly shared experiences that I think everybody can benefit from. For me, a connection with the natural world is fundamental to, honestly, quality of life. And I think when you are connected to the natural world, and I'm not trying to say I go out and I pick up litter every day, or I go and I hug trees or anything like this. It's not like it's not this extreme concept of being like a warrior for nature, which I think is important too. But I guess what I'm trying to say is going out for walks, for example, and just acknowledging the space around which you live. I always liked this concept of stewardship, like as we get older and go through life and we occupy plots of physical land throughout our lives, we should, because of what we are as humans and our responsibilities, we should become stewards of that area. and we should see ourselves as such. And that social responsibility that comes with it. Obviously, we have a responsibility to ourselves and to each other, but we also have a responsibility to the planet, to everything around us. So it's with that in mind that I wanted to. So speaking now more specifically about Around Curiosity's Edge, which is the young adult fantasy series that I'm wrapping up this year. It was kind of with that in mind, and with this added benefit of travel and adventure, because something that's been pivotal for me as an adolescent going into my 20s, now in my 30s, has been travel. It's been fundamental for me to see more of the world and gain perspectives I would never have had I'd stayed in one place. And I think more people need to trust themselves to know that displacing yourself can bring myriad benefits beyond anything you can realize. So I think getting out in nature, I think travel, and honestly, also finding ways. I had this sign for the longest time when I lived in Germany, and I got to find it again. I don't know where it went, but it says, "When was the last time you did something for the first time?" And I would read it every day. And it was kind of one of those things that was departure from the comfort zone. When's the last time you made yourself depart from your comfort zone, even in the slightest? Because I've realized in life there's an incontrovertible correlation between discomfort and growth. You have to be uncomfortable at certain times in order to grow. You cannot just be comfortable all the time. So I think you will inevitably encounter creativity in yourself when you're put into a situation that's uncomfortable for you. So I guess to answer your question, it's a long-winded way to answer this, but I think if there's something that can spur creativity in almost anybody, it would be, for me, those three pillars, which would be like connect with the world around you. We're grounded with that. We come from it. Get out there and see it, right? Travel. And finally, just push yourself into situations. I'm not saying be dangerous, but put yourself into situations that are, you almost feel like maybe a little beyond you, and let you surprise yourself a little bit and be like, oh my gosh, that, it's almost like a character invention. It's like becoming somebody you didn't know you could be, and stepping into those shoes. Right. So with those things in mind, I think some of the storytelling elements are really geared towards that. And for example, Salem, who's the main character in Around Curiosity's Edge, she's 15 years old when the story starts. So he's at a very formative age, and it's a young adult fantasy. So obviously for a young adult, these are years of our lives when we're incredibly impressionable. So these experiences that are hitting us, they're kind of tearing us apart each time and making us new. And I feel like as we get older, the only thing that changes really is we become a little more calloused, right? We become glass half empty mentality a little more, and we're not as impressionable, or maybe we are, we just let things bounce off a little more, for better and for worse. So what's fun about the genre, and what's fun about anything that's a little less than adult, is that there is that element of, I think, childlike wonder that you spoke about earlier. And naturally, every adult still has that kid in them. And the funny thing is, and we can come back to this later, but the more I've been thinking about it, the more I find that the older I get, the real pathway to whatever happiness is, as you want to define it, is rediscovering your inner child. That is for most creatives, I would say that's kind of what we're all trying to attain, is what we had to begin with, which is ironic because we already had it. And somehow along the way, we've maybe lost it a little bit, or become a little, too cumbersome with all the weight of all the responsibilities and the pragmatic life we need to lead. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what I've been thinking about in terms of with the writing and the young adult novels.
I love that. And I feel like it's a beautiful segue into what you and I were briefly speaking about before, which is, how do you interweave your pragmatic life and working for a biotechnology corporation and balancing that with your creative life? Because so many creatives, they're doing both things. And you are one of those creatives who's chasing your dreams while also, living and breathing the pragmatic life of your day-to-day working for a business.
Yeah, well, and to this end, maybe I would just give a plug to Conscious Community, even though we're on Conscious Community. I think that we inspire each other and we lift each other up as creatives to see that, oh my gosh, well, she's doing this, he's doing this, they're doing this, while at the same time, while managing this other elements of life. It gives me this sense of I'm not alone in this, even though it may be my solo journey, we're all doing it kind of together, right? So I think there's something in that for sure, where creatives lift other creatives up. And this is probably the same with any endeavor, right? But then also to your point about the pragmatic elements of life, it's inescapable in some ways. And I guess I've come to this point where it used to be something, even in recent memory, in the last few years, it used to be something for me where I wanted to have this very hard dichotomy of this is who I am as a writer and this is who I am the rest of my life, right? Because I've always had this romanticized view of other writers who have gone on, or not writers, but just creatives in general, who have gone on to be these incredible people. And we see them as this person who just emerged as an entity that was fully formed, and almost like an author who you think their plots must be developed already in their head, when in reality they've made 37 drafts and the first 15 are terrible, right? So I think to that end, I've started to look at this combination of mundane life, if you want to call it that, and creative life as two beautiful things that are symbiotic. And even just one thing, right? It's just, you are the same person. So, and even more so, I'm thankful. And I think this is another part of the creative journey that's incredibly important. And you seem to be very well tapped into this yourself, but just practicing gratitude, especially as a creative person, I think is a fuel that nourishes your creative energy. So I'm incredibly grateful for the abilities I have to have a pragmatic side to life, to have another career that can help me get an income and help me fuel my creative endeavors. Because if I couldn't do that, I would be way worse off, I think. So I think it's coming from a perspective or a point of view that allows you to recognize all you've been given already and what you're able to do with that, and then move forward effectively. So the other side to this, of course, is in your day to day, because we're not all just in the flow state all the time creating, as nice as it would be, right? Then there wouldn't be the balance, right? You have to also be able to find the beauty in the mundane. And I think that goes back a little bit to what we were speaking about before, which is you need to stay constantly curious, and you need to recognize that every single person or every single moment of your life, you're interacting with something, whether it is another human or whether it is a tree or an entity or a passing breeze of something that knows more than you do. This humbling of just accepting that you pretty much don't know anything. I always thought it was funny that the more I know, the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't know, right? Like if you talk to anybody who's an expert in something, all they'll talk about is how much they don't know. And that's, to me, the true sign of expertise is somebody just admitting over and over again that I don't know, right? So I think there's a beauty in that. And I do think that there's this saying, right? Like it's, you can't even make this stuff up, right? And a lot of it's stories that come out of the real world. So when you write fiction, a lot of our fiction is inspired by what takes place in the mundane world, in that everyday world of what happens when we go to the gas station, when we go to the grocery store, when we're doing our 9-to-5 jobs, or, you know, nowadays it's changed a little bit, but still it's the same principle. And I think the ability to create well comes from the ability to be aware of the mundane and pull out the pieces that you can then tailor or let's say reform to fit the creative agenda, right? And then allows us to then open our perspective to a wider degree. So it's hard. It's hard to balance both. But then again, the hard things are the things worth doing, right? I mean, and I feel like, you ask anybody who's written novels, they'll tell you it's hard, but it's fun when you get through it, right? So does that resonate with you as somebody who's juggling?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting, the balance. And then also finding time to rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that also needs to be integrated in the process because it's part of the balance. Mm-hmm. So it all can exist, and allowing it to all just be part of the process. And again, reminding ourselves that it's all something to be grateful for, because even in the rest, that's where we can be revitalized to come up with these stories and to, create something new.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's all a dance. I love to compare it to a dance because it really just feels like this constant ebb and flow of, yeah, of course there's days that I would love to be a full-time creative, but at the same time, it also is helpful to talk to people that I probably wouldn't normally talk to and help them through tech support, which is just like I get to activate another part of my brain that I wouldn't normally have that access
Totally.
to.
And I feel like for a writer too, I don't know if I think it's similar across, but I'll tell you, the dialogue or the conversations you hear in real life are so much fuel for writing, whether you're writing nonfiction or fiction. I mean, go through an airport. For me, it's one of my favorite things because I listen to all the airport chatter and you get these glimpses, these little glimmers of what's going on in somebody else's life. It can be kind of dark sometimes. It could be a tough time they're going through, or it could be somebody who's light. And I use the example of an airport because, like many of us, I've been through a lot of them. And then you see these extremes of humanity. You see people who are reuniting after months apart. You see couples who are doing long distance, who are saying goodbye to one another and don't know when the next time is going to be when they're going to see each other, right? You see families who are trying to get themselves onto the plane. But I guess, like you said, with the calls on tech support, sometimes you hear somebody say something, or you kind of just become an observer or a witness to a situation and think like, gosh, I'm really glad I had that opportunity because I can use that. I can use that later, right? I mean, the world gives you lots of gifts every day, but we're just kind of a lot of times blind to it, I think. But yeah, it's a good point. It is a balancing act. Absolutely.
I'm curious how traveling and working across multiple countries has also just impacted your life personally, creatively, all of it, right? I'm sure it's played a massive role. You brought up so beautifully that it's important for us to at least explore that part of ourselves, right? I know for me, moving to Portland was pivotal and necessary for me to get past this boundary. So I'd be so curious to know what that process has been like for you, because not only did you move from Pennsylvania, but you've lived out of the country multiple times over, and now you're in California. So what has that been like to kind of integrate all of these beautiful lessons that you've been able to provide yourself with?
Thanks for asking. It's, gosh, I guess I don't know exactly. It's hard to say. It's like sometimes you don't even know why you do something. And I think this is something that I've had to kind of go back and forth on when we talk about being a creative versus pragmatic life, is understanding your why. Because sometimes it's clear in your mind, or at least it almost feels clear why you're doing something. And then if somebody were to, let's say you're sitting around a campfire across the world and somebody says, well, why are you out here? What are you looking for exactly? It could become very difficult to answer that question all of a sudden. So it was more like maybe you have a natural tendency towards wanting to experience other places, new cultures. I remember when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, we took a trip, I think it was an EF tour to Germany. And I think the feeling of we'd flown into Berlin, we'd gotten out, we were in the bus, and just the sensation or the rush of emotions when you're witnessing a new place, it's overwhelming. And for me, it was overwhelmingly positive. I mean, it was scary, but in this way where it's like, I just want to know about all of this stuff. I want to somehow find my way to be, right? There was a fascination with being different to that place and having it be a place where other people like us, right, like other humans, I guess, grew up and lived almost like a completely different culture in life. And there was a fascination in that. So then growing up and learning more about, and then deciding to study international business and kind of going the route of wanting to be, I guess, global in your mindset was something that was inherent for me at least. And then moving abroad, I would say for anybody who's considering doing it, do it. I wouldn't even hesitate. I mean, obviously you need to consider what's going on in your life, right? There are many, many nuanced situations where it's like, that may not be the best decision for you right now. But if I was in my early 20s, pretty unburdened in a lot of ways. So I think if anybody's in the stage, and it doesn't matter what age you are, right? You could be anywhere in life. And if you feel the inclination to do that, and you have, let's say you feel like you've gotten to a place within yourself, or even if you're not there yet, but you feel like you could be once you get there, it's kind of scary, but you could do it. I would say it was the most enriching decision I ever made for myself. Cause you have to navigate, it's okay. So here's a way I can think about it. I guess we talk about rediscovering childlike wonder. And when you go to a new place, we talked about you guys going to Japan soon, right? You go to a new place, you have to basically become a child again and go through the motions of, how do I order this? How do I speak to somebody? My gosh, try going to the doctor in another language. It's really hard, right? And it's also kind of intimidating because you're talking about things that can often be personal, but you have to somehow find a way to bridge that gap and find a connection with somebody who's foreign to you. But I would say if you can get through the initial hurdle, the payoff is enormous. And I would argue, I don't know, I've thought about this quite a bit, but if we were able to have more of our global youth travel or spend time in other places, it doesn't even always need to be abroad. I mean, the US is a big enough country. You could go somewhere else in the US and it feels like a different country. But if you could have, I say youth, it could be anybody. If you could have individuals go and spend time other places and see how life is different, I think that could fundamentally alter the way they empathize with others. Because I think the other thing that's important here about travel and specifically creative work and writing is this cultivation of empathy. So we talk about reading as being so important, as well as just listening to others and talking. And I think it's really what seems to be changing in the world. And it's almost strange because on the one hand, I feel like there's never been more empathy in the world with certain people I meet. I meet certain individuals and you think, oh my gosh, that person was just incredible. They were so understanding and empathetic of situations. And then on the right. And then you go to things like social media or the news and we talk about and they have such a negative connotation where it's like there seems to be a complete lack of empathy. But really, I think that travel more than anything gives you a sense of empathy for others, not sympathy. I think that's different because I think when you are in your bubble, and let's say you're living in a country like the US and you look at a place like India, you're sympathetic towards Indians. And you think, oh my gosh, that's a horrible condition they're living in. And then you go there and you meet some of the most incredible people you've ever met in your life. And you think, okay, yeah, they have their own challenges to work out in that country, but I'm not sympathizing for them. I'm empathizing with them, right? That they have the same wants and desires and challenges that I have as an individual. And I think that's probably the most beautiful thing that travel gives to anybody is this like, it takes away us and them because you're all of a sudden thrown into a situation where you're all in something together, right? And to me, that was huge. That changed my perspective on life, I think, probably many times over, but that was huge. And then I think the other piece to this, just to wrap it up, is probably this self-reliance. So everybody comes from different, let's say, backgrounds or histories. That said, I'm really blessed. I came from a very loving family that supported me and allowed me to feel confident that no matter what happened in life, I had them to fall back on. And I understand that not everybody is fortunate in that way. However, I will say that something that travel does, if you have the means, is it forces you to become self-reliant. It forces you to, again, leave the comfort zone, and then you realize, okay, I may have fallen into the water, but I can swim a little bit and I get better as I go. And it kind of grows this confidence in you that I find incredibly alluring in people. Like when I meet somebody who's confident in themselves, and we don't need to be the same type of person at all, but if I see that they're confident in who they are and what they're putting out there, I find it incredibly attractive. I find it very alluring and just I want to engage with that individual. And when I talk about confidence like this, I mean like a lack of judgment towards others, but a very strong, authentic voice for who they are. right? While moving through their own life journey. And I think travel brings that to people inevitably. I think there's no choice.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Travel has been the most pivotal experience, I think, for me. And I haven't had the opportunity to do it as much as I would like, but it's still very much on my heart to continue to do it, because each time it happens, something expands in me. And I love what you said, because it really does remove the separateness that we have a tendency as a species to feel. And it's like, we're not separate. And I'm sure just from being in India specifically, yes, you see the challenges that they experience, but you also get to see their strengths and their ability to tap into gratitude specifically. I feel like culturally, they're a grateful people. And so what a beautiful thing to witness, right? That alone.
Yeah. Totally. And I mean, it's just, it also, I mean, if you want to break it down to more pragmatic measures too, it allows you to make some of the best friends you'll ever make. And you create relationships that can last an entire lifetime. And I think that is, oh man, it's just, I think it's the reason we're here in the first place. I mean, I really strongly believe that it's like we're here. I don't know. I guess I've had this thought before where it's like, if I were to wake up tomorrow and I were the last person left on Earth, it may be kind of a morbid thought, but like, I'm not sure it would matter as much to me, because really for me, sharing the experience with everyone here is kind of what's keeping it all going. And it's like, we can talk about why creative people are creative. Is it to leave a legacy? Is it to create influence? Is it to gain power? I mean, everybody has their different, I guess, reasons or rationale for why they do what they do. But I think sharing our existence here on the pale blue dot with everybody else is kind of just, at the end of the day, that's why we're doing it. Right?
Agreed. Yeah. Community. And it really is that integration piece for us all. Like, we're meant to do life together, and we've come to the understanding that we need to be separate. But that has been, I think that's also been kind of put into these structures that we are currently now trying to eradicate and deconstruct. Yeah. Right? Like, if you think about tribes and you think about just what came before, all of our ancestors, that was how they practiced life. They did life in community.
Totally. And it's exactly, you're right. I think tapping into that sense of community, and maybe this is a way for us to pivot back onto the original thought, which was travel. I think travel allows you, I mean, there's no doubt, I think different communities make life diverse. And we talked about the diversity that we see in Los Angeles area where I'm based. Is amazing. I love that. So as much as I love this idea of eliminating the us and them, and I think that's true, I think there's also a very large amount of beauty in diversity itself, and embracing that and recognizing our differences. I mean, I'm a soccer player, and I love when the World Cup comes around, because the World Cup, more than any other, I would say, global competition, the Olympics are up there, but the World Cup is special. It's all these nations competing together, but also there's this sense of it's like one big like go world party. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just really cool. And I find myself getting really emotional around that time, just because it is cool to see nations come together and work together, even to have a competition that's just I don't know, an amazing event. So you're right. It comes down to community. And I think maybe as a writer, I've been thinking about this too. Why do it in the first place? And I think that, like we said before, talking about community, there is a sense that maybe, and this is maybe a second point to bring up about the pragmatic side of life. So there's two things. I want to connect with others, and I want to maybe have somebody down the road read something that I've written and have it move them in a way because that to me is like time travel. It's like, you imagine you read something that somebody's written who's already passed on, and it moves you've connected through time, and that's incredible. And beyond that, I think that, yeah, just using this medium to communicate with each other. Gosh, I forgot the other thought I was going to say. It'll come back to me.
It will.
I'll follow up with it.
It will.
Yeah.
And I think I love that idea of time travel, because it really is, if you think about even a present experience, right? And you're being reminded of something that happened to you when you were a child. Right. Yes, that's in the past, but that moment is in your present experience. So it's that too. It's so funny. I have journals that I keep, and I've written quite a few journals since I moved to Portland. I have like, I don't know, 15 journals. And so reading back to my journals from when we first moved and seeing it almost as a prayer and seeing these things that have come to fruition, it's just interesting how that comes alive. And I'm sure for you, you have things that you've written and your past, and you get just see how much your writing has changed or evolved. And
that's true. Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think the other thing I wanted to add was just that the cool thing about, and we talked about this dichotomy to life about, let's say you're doing tech support part of the day, and the other part of the day you're running a creative channel that's growing and touching people's lives, but both give you something like, I think when I think about my work in a biotech company, I think to myself, well, this is a dynamic way to engage with my day and my environment that's creating change right now. I'm trying to move something forward that maybe somebody else, because the biotech I work for, quickly, it's called Emerald Cloud Lab. It's a remote controlled laboratory. So scientists can send samples in and remotely control their experiments from anywhere in the world through an integrated layer of robotics and logistics. It's crazy. I know the guys who figured it out they're incredible. So I guess my point with that is, to me, if I think about the end goal of that, there are patients suffering from incurable diseases currently where the research and development done in laboratories like cloud labs can become life-saving treatments for them down the road, right? Just from R&D that's done early on. And we don't know how that all plays out. It's very complex, but we know that we're part of a bigger plan, or let's say, I shouldn't say plan, but we're part of a bigger project or goal that we're trying to help each other, right? So I feel like that part of life is dynamic, where you can go out each day, talk to other people, and try to help move us forward in a positive way. But then the creative side, like writing a book, is passive to me, where I'm actively writing one and I put it out there. But like we said before, maybe years down the road, maybe I pick it up again, maybe somebody else picks it up, and it urges them into something where they want to create dynamic change in their environment. So that's something where it's like, I guess there is an element of leaving something behind so somebody else can pick it up. That's certainly present. But it's also like you said before, it's just a way for us to continue these threads of connection even after we're gone, or not even present, right?
Totally. Yeah. Legacy. Yeah. I love the idea of legacy, and I personally believe, all of it's a choice. I realize that. However, I personally am in the belief that all of us have a gift and some type of creative presence to offer community and the world. It's just about uncovering what that looks like for us, because our experiences have shaped us in a way that are completely unique to us. So it's really beautiful how even just hearing you talk about the work that you do and traveling globally, and now then being a storyteller to share these adventures with people, like that is a bridge. You are a bridge in the most like beautiful sense of the word. I love the word bridge because it really does offer you this image of connecting two worlds.
Totally. Yeah. I love that imagery too. Bridges. I mean, yeah. And the idea that we as individuals can become those, it, I don't know, spurs this greater purpose from within that all of a sudden. And the cool thing is too, it changes, right? It's not like you're a static entity. And I find that when I'm at social gatherings a lot that, you're moving, and I'm sure everybody's felt this to a certain degree, but you're moving from person to person or from group to group, and the energy's changing, and you feel like you can go through a single evening and feel like you've had 13 very different conversations, and all like, oh my God, how do I wrap my head around what even happened? But what you don't realize is you might be facilitating, becoming a conduit for connections that you didn't even know you were doing, right? And that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. I mean, the newest book I have coming out it's kind of along the same thought thread of you don't know the impact you have on the world at all times. So this idea of magic, this idea of, right, that you can impact your immediate environment just by the words you say to other people, or the body language you give off, a compliment you give, or an insult, right? Not that nobody intentionally goes out into the world and thinks, I'm going to insult people today, right? But we inevitably in our day-to-day lives get frustrated and get fed up with things. So I think there's the fantasy that you can go to, which is like around Curiosity's Edge, which is very mythic. And I love that genre, love that type of fantasy too. But then there's also the magic in the mundane. And that to me is it's really exciting right now because the new work in progress is based in that. It's actually based in Los Angeles. So it's going to be a lot of relevant scenes and a storyline there. It's fun. Yeah, it's exciting. But I think, yeah, to your point that you were saying about being a bridge, every single person does that. We are just by being a sentient being, going out into the world and engaging, you're doing that. So it's something to think about. Absolutely. It's tiring to become aware. It's tiring to be aware. I'm certainly not aware all the time. Definitely not. But it's definitely great to have these kind of conversations.
Yeah. I have the tendency, I think, to take life a little too seriously and almost be hyper aware. So I'm in a place right now to tap back into play. And I think that play is necessary. Part of that could be travel, but I know, I believe like a month ago you went on that really fun expedition with Johnny. And
oh yeah, we did.
To me, that's like travel, right? You went to a tiny town. That's play.
Yeah.
You get to go and interact with a people that maybe you wouldn't, right? A small town.
Totally. Definitely wouldn't.
And where was it? It was in Northern California, correct?
It was Porterville.
Porterville.
Which we didn't know at the time had suffered a lot because of the recent rainfall in California. So it was one of these things where, like you said, and maybe I was curious, before I forget, I want to ask you when you talk about play and how play is important for creatives, we should come back and revisit that in a moment.
I love that.
But just for the sake of this explanation about this trip, so we had this idea to kind of take a little getaway trip without any expectations, and I think that's part of it too, is kind of doing something where you have a loose schedule. And they say there's two different kinds of writers. They say there's pantsers and they say there's architects. Architects plan out every single detail, right, and how they want it to look, and pantsers go by the seat of their pants and they just kind of have like a loose idea and just kind of write it. And there's no right way to do this. But I think that for this type of trip we were trying to take, it was more of a pantser trip where it's like we had a place in mind, but we didn't know where. We thought we wanted to go into Sequoia, but Sequoia was closed for the most part because the rainfall had created these mudslides that had been endangering the sequoia trees. So we were kind of unable to do that. So we ended up exploring the town of Porterville and the surrounding towns up there. And man, gosh, Springville was the other town. And it was just so like in your face amazing because there's this small town in California. They're like microcosms that you didn't even know existed. And all of a sudden you're getting to explore them, talk to these people. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, who are you? What's your name? Right? I grew up in a small town. So it's like, it felt very kind of like, oh, nice. You want to know my name? Why? In LA, sometimes it gets lost a little bit, but you go out there and it's and they're telling us about how the recent flooding has impacted them. And again, coming back to why travel creates empathy, it's almost like, oh my God, I had no idea that you had been impacted that way. And that was such a troublesome experience for you. So it was a fantastic trip. We had a great time. But to your point, play in that sense and allowing yourself to just relax or become aware of other aspects of life is very important. So I'd love to hear a little more about what you were saying about play in that context.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think I take myself too seriously often. I think a lot of us have the tendency to do that, right?
I definitely do. Yeah.
But with Brian, for instance, Brian is really good at not doing that. And so there can be some friction at times because he's in this like super playful, goofy state. And I'm like, well, we need to get this done, and it's like, just chill. And so part of why travel is so great for us is because that happens for both of us. I like totally am like in the state of wonder that we were talking about. It's just everything is brand new. And with play, I believe that going to a new town and being able to exercise your truth and who you are, that's play. That can be how you wear your creative, lens, if you will, almost like within yourself, and then share it with others. So I'd be curious to hear how you play or tap into that state of flow, to get into that rhythm, if you will.
Yeah. I think like what you just said, there is, and the cool thing about travel, like you were just saying, if you and Brian go anywhere, especially like Japan, for example, it's removing yourself from familiar environs is like that makes a difference, right? Because you have no choice. You become this, you have to be in a state of fluid acceptance, I would say, to move forward. And yeah, I think another way to play for me is, I think who you surround yourself with matters. And for example, similar to like being friends with Johnny or other really good friends of mine, or even my girlfriend Jen, like we'll plan things sometimes, or people will say, hey, I have an idea. I want to do this. Right. And in my mind, my first reaction might be, I don't think I want to do that. Surfing was a good example for me. So like I had a good friend of mine, Anders, he said to me, I've been surfing. I'd like to take you with me. My first thought was one of fear and almost like, I don't have time to surf. Not only that, but it's scary. Fast forward and I go out surfing with him, and I'll be honest, it kicked my butt a lot. I wiped out a lot, and I still do. Right. But the choice to follow somebody into something and willingly let them kind of become your guide, or a little bit of, and this, I think good friends or good connections do this for each other. They say like, hey, I think you'd like this. Try to come along. Just try it. And even though your initial response might be one of fear or negativity, you might be surprised if you go to it and open yourself up to it, because these are, again, connections that you would have never made otherwise. Whether it's connecting with other people or connecting with the ocean like you never thought you would, or connecting with parts of yourself, right? So I think in a lot of ways, I allow my network of my closest contacts, and even, my larger network, to influence that for me. And then you can obviously become a little bit choosy after there. I mean, I think it's important to say, okay, I tried that. Maybe it wasn't for me, but I did try it. Right. So that's really important too. And, other elements of play, I would say, would be, being a bit silly. I know it sounds silly, but I talk to the birds that come by all the time. And, I know you and Brian are big outdoors. I mean, you guys like to be outside in nature too. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if you guys did something similar, but like the birds that come by, I swear to God, they look at me and we're communing somehow. Right. I mean, most times they want me to give them something. I'll like leave them a little cracker or something, but it's still like sharing this space with them. And I think there's something to that. It's like, I might be pretending that it's real, but what's the difference in pretending it's real if I believe it to be real, right? That's really what fiction is. So I think that's a big part of it too. Let yourself be a little silly. Let yourself be a kid a little bit,
Absolutely. Yes. I talk to the birds all the time. I have.
Yeah. Maybe that's a normal thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think again, that goes back to us thinking that we're separate. We're not. Like,
yeah,
we
totally.
get to commune and interact with nature because we are nature. And
yes,
of course we can have the opportunity to communicate. Some animals are going to be more willing. And and then, some will be less inclined, which I'm sure you've had the experience of learning very quickly,
Yeah.
And I think that that's a beautiful way to play. I do the same thing. And I immediately can tap into my childlike essence of curiosity and wonder. And I think that, yes, if there's a pull in your heart that's telling you this is true, this is real, this feels authentic in nature, then it probably is. And so why would we doubt ourselves? And I think once we actually start to actually feel that truth and that belief, that's when things open up for us, and then everything becomes magic, right?
Yep. Totally agree. And I really think the creative journey is one of that, is allowing that flow back and forth with the outside world, and then having discipline to have a vision and put steps into action. So, not to get too far into the weeds about that, but I just think that's probably, if anybody's listening it's currently pursuing something creative or something in that realm, I think it's really about, at least from my own experience so far, what it sounds like you've gone through, Danae, is like, you need to have those elements, but I think there's also a hard piece of discipline that needs to be in place. And you can really cultivate that to be something that you start to crave in a positive way, that you appreciate what it takes to get things done in this way, right? So like, you need to have the side that wants to just be playful, but the side that sits down and gets this job done is also really cool and exciting, and it's hard, and that's also what makes us human in a lot of ways, is having that, being able to become masters over certain things, even if somebody to be like master our own indiscipline, right? Our own lack of attention span. So I just wanted to add that last part, because I've been feeling lately, I'm like, like many people, I would say, my attention's diverted so easily sometimes. I mean, I sit down to write, and 2 minutes later I'm up doing something else. And it's like, what? How'd you get up already? You just sat down, right? So having like that also, I think, is a differentiator for sure.
Yeah, I would love to share what that looks like for you. Like, how do you create a disciplined practice for yourself? What do you do in sense of like ritual, or, do you have any practices that feel grounding for you when you get into your creative flow to write?
So I usually set a time limit. So I do writing sprints. So for me, lately it's been something like a 45-minute to 50-minute sprint, and then maybe like a 15-minute break. And this is all encapsulated into maybe like a 2-hour window that is my writing time. And maybe preceding all of that, you need to protect that time you need to protect your creative time as though it's time that's making you money. And it may be something maybe it is actively making you money already. Maybe it's not yet, right? I have a book that I'm working on, hasn't done anything yet. It's not even a real thing yet, right? But I'm working on it like it is something that's bringing me, right, revenue. And I'm not saying that that's the reason to make it, but you need to treat it like that, like a job that's earning you income. And I think I saw something the other day online. I don't want to speak off because I want to give somebody credit, but I think it was the fighter Conor McGregor. He might have said it, which I'm not like a big fan or anything, but he said something about how it's kind of an insult to the people who believe in you and want to see you succeed if you don't hold that discipline in place. Because you have people behind you that say like, man, it's so cool that you're pursuing that. It's so awesome. And it's really inspiring me as well. So I've kind of thought about it lately that it's almost like, of course it's for me, but it's also like, there's this like inner desire to want to see this thing completed. And I think it might have been Maya Angelou, I'm not sure, but somebody said it's nothing worse than having a story inside of you that you haven't gotten out yet, that you haven't released yet, and I feel that pain, because it's like, you want to share, you want to have that out, and it takes time, and you have to have the patience and the diligence to let it make its way out as you're going to. I mean, I think Stephen King says, sorry, I'm making a lot of references right now. Stephen King says something about how it's like uncovering a fossil. slowly but surely, right? You're uncovering bits of it, and each time you go. And I often feel like going through a story, it's almost like when it starts out, it's very foggy, and you're wading through this fog, you're wading through this mist. And then as you start to understand your characters more, understand your setting a little bit more. And a lot of times the quality comes from the quantity. So one of the tricks that I've learned as a writer is that the quality you're going to find comes from the quantity you're going to produce. So that not to say you just aimlessly, but I will say you just got to go. And a lot of it's going to be something that you don't need to use or don't need to go back to, but you had to go through all of that to get to the gem. Right. And then that said, yeah. So I guess setting timers, protecting the time, and the final piece, which maybe you've heard before, but I think it's important to repeat, is ending on a note that excites you for the next session you're going to start. So let's say you're finishing out a scene, or you're finishing out a chapter, or you're finishing out editing an episode from a podcast, anything. End on something where you have this sense of, okay, I'm excited to get started on that tomorrow, right? Because then you know where you're going to pick up. Because that itself, we need some low-hanging fruit sometimes as creatives. We just need it because it's hard to get started. But once you start, it's a little easier.
That's so good.
I
like that. It's funny. I haven't heard that, but I noticed that I definitely do it. And I noticed that when I don't do it, I leave myself with a bit of a disposition of like, I don't want to do this today. I don't want to do this today. I have that too. Yeah. But I like the idea of keeping things exciting, right? It's all exciting, and it's an honor and a privilege to be able to create and to have creative force move through us. However, there's always some stagnancy that can come in the midst of that process. So I also am super curious about what the creative block process looks like, because we all we go through those too as creatives. So how do you care for yourself, if you will, during those moments of creative blocks?
Tell you, it's difficult. So I just want to, I think with all of these things, there's something to be said about how there are strategies, but we should acknowledge that what we're trying to do is it's daunting, it's challenging. And I think part of the self-help or the self-care of taking on big endeavors is accepting that's hard. And I like that, honestly. It's been helping me. That said, breaking tasks down into more bite-sized, manageable tasks is something that certainly is helpful. Oftentimes, I do the same thing if I train, if I train for like a run or a race or something like that. I say to myself, I want to run a mile. I don't care how fast I run it. I just want to get it done. I can walk it. I don't care. So sometimes for me, it's even so, and this is the quantity again. If I want to write 1,500 words that day, it's not like I have to sit down and write all 1,500 at a time. It's not even like those 1,500 need to be the best words I've ever written. Guaranteed they won't be. But I try to get through them, and I want to get that done before I go to sleep that night. So there is a time for rest, and I think it's important. But you can't let these future ideas of what you think you're going to create hold you back from just making something in the first place. So that's hard. That's really hard to do, though. That's like when you unlock something that's going to just let you go, right? And I think you've tapped into something when you have that. And I don't think I've personally gotten there yet. I have a lot of blocks on my day-to-day that are keeping me. So a lot of it comes down to being a very scheduled system of these timers, and also deadlines. I have to keep myself to deadlines that I want to finish a certain project within a certain time frame. Now, putting all of that aside, I think putting everything down and going for a walk is a secret weapon that everybody has, but many of us don't use, because just walking without any kind of goal in mind is so nice. It really is. Stop and smell the flowers. It's such a cliche, but it's so true. That just opens you up a lot to a lot, to just not feeling so held down or anchored down by this weight of expectation that you put on yourself. And not to be right. Most people, we think people are thinking about us way more than they are. But most of the times, everybody's just thinking about themselves. Nobody's really thinking about you, really. I mean, ideally, your partner is, or your family. That's probably happening. But let's be honest. Like, everybody's off living their lives. So just keep going and keep doing your thing. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, you start to make more and more. And this is the other piece I think that's really important. And this is what I tell myself every single day. I have heard before, and I think it's very true, that when you talk about perseverance, like most podcasts, for example, don't make it past episode 3. I think like less than half make it past episode 20. So when you make it past episode 20, you all of a sudden put in like the 10th, the 90th or whatever, the highest percentile of podcasts to keep going even, right? And the same is true for writers. So it's like, or any creative endeavor, most people just quit because it's hard to sustain and life gets the better, right? Other priorities come up. And ideally, I would wish for all of those people that they pick it back up at some point and keep going. But I think the point is for other creatives out there who are actively engaged in their journey, you just got to understand that it's all about perseverance and like embracing that journey and keep going. Just keep going, because God, there's going to be more days there's more of those drab days of like, God, am I really just doing anything? Than there are the days where it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. There's no doubt there's more of those other ones, right? But it's like that visual where it's like today felt like a plateau, or even maybe like a little bit like this. But that's just today. And then if you zoom out to what this year looks like, or what the next 3 years look like, it's just like this, right? It's compound interest. And I think especially for anybody who's relatively or feeling a little doubtful of that, you have to believe that all what you're putting in, it matters. Or what you're putting in, but what you're giving out, it matters. So.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I would love for you to share an offering, a piece of wisdom, just something that feels relevant for you in this now moment to invigorate or inspire creatives on their path.
Oh, well, thanks for asking. I feel really honored to have had you ask me onto the conscious communion today. And I think there's a power in creatives elevating other creatives, or people elevating other people, let's say. So I just feel really thankful for this. And I guess kind of similar to the thought that I was just sharing before, I think the way we inspire each other is to keep on going and being authentic in what you're putting out there, because it will resonate with others, and that will come back. And I just think it's like you are yourself like a conduit where the water flows in, water flows out, and you can't let it get too, right, bottled up in there. So I'm really super grateful to have been on here today. And I love speaking to you today. It's really, really lovely. And just the insight you've shared from your own side. So I just want to say, keep going. I love it. I love tuning in. And for anybody listening out there, for your own journeys, please keep going, because people do care, and it is exciting. But yeah, all that said, it's been really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would love to have you back on when you've finished your book.
Yeah,
and
me
see
too.
Just how that process was. But I would love for you to also just share where folks can find you, where they can find your books, and just give yourself a little plug.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So website is jphostetler.com. So it's Hostetler, JP Hostetler, and same thing on Instagram. And yeah, I'm always happy to engage with readers or other creatives, or even talk about possible collaborations. I'm in the process right now of wrapping up the 3rd book of Around Curiosity's Edge, this young adult trilogy. So that'll be hopefully out next year. I have the new standalone adult fantasy novel that I'm talking about, which is more of a whimsical fantasy set in the real world, set in Los Angeles. That one's going to be cool. And then finishing up the audiobook of Around Curiosity's Edge too. So there'll be an audiobook out for that. So that's been a whole thing in and of itself. We'll talk about that next time. But doing character voices. Oh, one piece of advice for authors out there: I would start with a standalone, not a series. And I would think about, if you're going to make an audiobook and want to narrate it, don't do too many characters, because you got to do a lot of voices. A lot of voices. It's crazy. Fun though. Yeah.
What a journey. Definitely the next time we chat, I would love to hear about that, because talk about play.
It is. It is.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such an honor to chat with you and just get to hear more about your process and your insights. And I appreciate you and your experience. So thank you.
Awesome, Danae. Likewise. Appreciate you too. And thank you so much. And we will, hopefully talk again soon, but have a great rest of your day there.
You too. All the love.
All right. Likewise. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey there. It's Danae again. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. If this podcast resonates, please like, subscribe, follow, and share if you're willing. Reviews help too. So if you're feeling the vibe, please leave a review where you can. Sending all the love. Peace.